The red light's on. Must be recording. All right, Connor, the recorder is on now officially.
Good.
No longer than an hour per night.
What's that?
No longer than an hour in your
Brother, no
presentation.
worries. Unless Rich keeps asking me questions, we'll move right through.
You plugged in?
Yeah. I just in that case, yeah, I don't want to move this actually.
Please rise for the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's 6 p.m. for the curriculum meeting. The committee members present are Carol Bites and Dave Rathgeb, with Rich Martino, who's chairing the meeting for Mr. Kurtz. Mr. Kurtz is on the phone. He could not be here in person tonight. And we have 8 administrators here, 9 administrators here, and no members of the public or press. So with that, we'll get right into the agenda. So we'll skip right down to the textbook review process. And Connor, do you want to talk about what you actually wanted with that? Because as I told you on the phone earlier today, I think the process itself is something the administration needs to develop and just inform the board. So what were you looking for with this?
Sure. I'm looking in a lot of ways. I wanted to continue the discussion we were having last meeting in regard to the textbook purchasing process. But we also got a little bit off track last meeting and began talking about the curriculum review cycle. And we asked Mrs. Kiesel to come back with her matrix redesigned to show the courses in each block as they move through that cycle. But I would agree, Mr. Martino, that if the administration could develop a process for reviewing and determining the number of textbooks we need, that would be helpful if they could come up with that plan and then bring it to the committee for review.
Mrs. Kiesel just handed out a list somewhat like what you saw last meeting with a 6-year plan for curriculum implementation. So what did you want to continue discussing?
Well, if the committee has anything, I thought we just want to continue discussing this, and I would like to see, to what you just said, Mr. Martino, perhaps at the next meeting, a process outlined on paper for determining what textbooks we need, what courses need textbooks, and what the process is for ordering those books. That's what I'd like to see from the administration.
Well, let me ask.
So I don't know if anybody wants to discuss that now, or if the administration would like to chime in, if that could be provided by next meeting.
Well, let me ask with Mr. Hurley and Mrs. Kiesel here. Saturday, during a break-in or a lull in one of our sessions, it was discussed that some textbooks that were approved in June were not ordered until September, and there was an extra charge for expedited delivery. So with this in place, I guess the question is how that happened.
This
this isn't going to happen again. Mrs. Kiesel's developed a process to ensure from top to bottom, and she'll provide the written document for you in our next committee meeting from top to bottom so that type of thing doesn't happen.
What did happen? I'm curious.
I just think in general, we have not had clear procedures for a long time, and the procedure is just unclear. Basically what happened, one person thought the other person was ordering the book, and that person thought this person ordered it. And there was some,
So now we have a process.
yes.
I guess without going through the whole process, who does it funnel through?
The actual requests come from the department chairs if you're talking about high school where most textbooks are purchased. I mean, we do purchase them at the elementary level, few, and at the middle school. But the teachers would meet with the curriculum department chairs, and then the department chairs would, then they would go to the principal and to myself. And then there are two different documents, one for just textbooks and one for new courses with lots of different information that they have to do. And then I would approve that, and then I would work with the business department for purchasing.
So what I asked then, I guess it all funnels through you. So none of the schools individually order books on their own.
I believe what we discussed was individual schools ordering replacement books only, and the rest of the textbooks coming from district allocation.
Even replacement books, shouldn't that funnel? I mean, just so that it's controlled.
I think the difficulty with replacement books, and that's a fair question. A lot of times with replacement books, it's two kids move in and we need to get two new textbooks for Algebra 1, so you'll see that type of situation. If a kid drops a book in a puddle and it's unusable the rest of the year, we try to keep our books tight with the population that we have, so it's easier probably for the building levels to do that. We certainly want them to be in communication with our curriculum director, but it's probably more practical for them if they need two textbooks. It's already a board-approved textbook series. It's just a matter of getting enough copies because of move-ins or something of that nature.
Well, to expedite it, couldn't they, I mean, I'm not saying hold everything up, but at least send Mrs. Kiesel a note saying we ordered.
Yep, I think that should be part of the process. So you get a note so you're aware of what's going on.
How do we decide who we order the books from?
Well, I would speak with different vendors and see where we can get the best deal.
I was actually maybe I know books are heavy. There should be a handling fee for some of those. So you order like one or two, they do a really stock it for you then more than as a replacement.
When you look at one or two textbooks, and I'll just share my experience as a building principal, I mean, basically you're going to like Full Ed, Amazon, some of the used books dealers. You're generally, when you're only replacing, it's a used book you're replacing with, not a brand new one, just to save money.
So we take into account the shipping and handling fees when we're doing our order from them.
I'm sorry.
You take into account all that.
Yes, absolutely.
So if somebody's a little higher price, but they offer free shipping.
Right.
So it's like, what is it, 10% of the wow.
Well, I don't know, and just to put this whole textbook thing to bed, what started this back in June was 63 AP biology books for the high school. How many kids are actually in AP biology? I'm just curious.
We're probably in the upper 40s, low 50s right now. I'd have to back them up and pull the numbers out.
But not 63.
I don't want to say that for sure.
And the reason I asked, Preston, is if you're looking at 13 to 15 books, they were almost $200 a piece.
Right. Let me confirm.
Yeah, please, because that's a considerable amount of money for books that are just sitting there then.
Along those lines, Mr. Martino, I did look through the policy in ordering textbooks textbooks and the approval process and those kinds of things. And something that we'll want to do is update the policy, because I did notice that I think the month is May or June to order textbooks. That may have worked back in the day where budgets weren't due so early in the year and that kind of thing, but I think we want to revisit that.
Yeah, if you would, mention that to Mr. Wolf before the next meeting, just so it's something he's aware of. But, yeah, we have a lot of policies and other things that need to be updated. So, Connor, that, as far as I'm concerned, at least puts the textbooks to bed. What do you want to discuss with curriculum?
You mean the curriculum review cycle?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
I just thought it would be good to review the information that Mary Beth Kiesel put together for the committee, and if she'd like to maybe explain some of the changes.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said about changes?
If you want to explain the changes. Connor, which changes?
Mrs. Kiesel sent out new documents to the committee. I'm going to pull them up here. All right. The email that Mary Beth Kiesel sent out was on Thursday, September 24th, and it includes the following documents: the curriculum implementation plan cycle, and that was adjusted to include the priority courses or the priority classes that we'd be looking at. So is there any comment on that? I mean, Mrs. Kiesel put it together for us. I didn't want to just move on unless somebody, if there were still comments. One of the things we asked for last meeting was to go through the 6-year curriculum implementation plan and identify what's required for each course when evaluating them and what may just be a suggestion. Is everybody aware of the document I'm referring to?
Everyone should have it in front of them.
Curriculum mapping.
Okay.
Curriculum mapping,
The
priority matrix.
implementation plan, and then at the bottom it says asterisk denotes required action.
Yep.
See that?
Yeah, that's the form she passed out, Connor.
Yes. So the changes, I guess I could, these were changed from the last meeting to include what needs to happen when reviewing these curricula versus what's just suggested. And again, we discussed this last committee meeting, but to bring some closure to it, does anybody have anything they'd like to add? Because if not, we can move on. I don't want to just... I wanted to include it on the agenda for the sake of discussion if anybody had anything. But I have nothing in particular at this point, personally. But if other members of the committee have any comments, this is a good time to say them.
I just had a question about the priority mapping, curriculum mapping priority matrix. If I'm reading this right, then it's in the year 2015-16, the school year. We're in the second year of the social studies 6-year cycle.
We kind of skipped the first year just because we had to, because curriculum has not been written for so long that the last year was the first time we wrote it in a long time and aligned it to PA4. So that's the reason
We
we're starting.
skipped the analysis
Right,
because
so
we
started
knew
right
it
in
just...
on it.
Okay, and I thought the curriculum committee was going to have, be invited to sit in on some of those curriculum rewritings. Do you meet on a regular basis? And I'd be very interested in engaging in the discussion.
We have not met yet this year.
Okay.
I am meeting with the high school teachers October 12th during the in-service. You're welcome to stop by if you'd like to.
Is that the forum you go to? How does it happen? How do you sit down and rewrite curriculum?
In the past, well, last year was the first year I facilitated curriculum writing. We met here at the district office, and I think Mr. Martino actually stopped in one of the days when I was working with kindergarten through 8th grade teachers for math. But we typically meet here, and what I do is solicit interest first at the building level, and then teachers would let their principals know if they are interested, and then typically the principal will have input on the final selection of the teacher that is going to represent their team. So there'll be one person who actually does the curriculum writing. However, it is in collaboration with the other team members. And that's why we like to do it during the school year as opposed to writing curriculum during the summer kind of in a vacuum.
And who else is on the team? Just everybody in that department?
It changes, yes.
Everyone in that department?
Department or grade level, depending on what grade.
Thank you.
And it's less expensive to do it during the year.
Much.
Yes. Connor, nobody else seems to have anything to add to that. Is that okay?
Yeah, we can move on to the next topic.
Do you have a drum roll or anything as we introduce Mr. McKnight?
No booze and hisses over. Not a drum roll. Okay. Well, we had some conversation about doing the state of the high school, and I think Jenny, you're next on state of the middle school next meeting. I'm not kidding. I thought I'm not making up. I thought we were going to do one meeting. I think they said that last time.
I certainly can do that.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to throw you under the bus, Jenny. I thought that's what we said. I'll just stick to what I have. Okay, so state of the high school. So I have SPP up there as a question because the data's not out. You know the old data. I suspect it was an 83.3. And I can click on the link and I will PDF this to everybody on the committee and the board so you guys can go through it afterwards. But one of the things that we should think about when we're looking at school performance profile is it's a lagging indicator, meaning that students who took the test in 9th grade or 10th grade, their data doesn't come online and reflect our school performance until they're in 11th and 12th grade. So numbers, for example, great numbers coming forward will be attributed to Mr. Hank, quite frankly. Whatever numbers we attributed to previous administrations, it'll be 2 or 3 years out before we begin to feel the effect of changes that we're currently making. So when you get this in a PDF form, if you click on that link, it will take you to the school performance profile, and you can look through all the kind of data you'd like to look for. We expect, I think, Mr. Hurley, maybe this October, we should be seeing the new number, right?
Yeah, they're delaying it again. I just got a notice from TV, so we're going to be a couple weeks out probably before we get the actual number. We're only going to receive the number for the high school because the PSSAs, the Keystones are still in existence, but the PSSAs is an entirely new test.
And I would ask you to reframe your thinking about the school performance profile. That's a minimal proficiency level. That is not a maximum measurement of what happens at the high school, nor should it be. And I've engaged the staff at the high school to ask them to define what metric and/or metrics do they think we ought to be looking at that says we do an excellent job. So what they shared with me was, well, we really get kids in great places. We get them in great schools, and that's what we do really well. I think that's a good metric. Where are we sending kids off to, whether it be college, university, trade, military, etc.? Where are we sending kids? And beginning to track that data, because that's easily attainable by acceptance letters and where kids are leaving. What happens to them when they get in there, that's a different story. Here's our percentage of enrollment by ethnicity, so you can kind of see our breakdown. We're about 88% Caucasian, and then you can see, we're about 2% Asian, almost 3% Hispanic, and our largest minority group is African American. Here are the performance fast facts. When you look at kids who sat for the test for Keystones, when you look at the students, here's our average SAT scores for the class that is currently that just graduated, so last year's data. Now that is not as lagging. See, we're at 505, 506 in math, and so you can read the numbers. The ACT, I would not put a lot of weight on. We only had about 32 students take the ACT, so that's a determinant. The next chart I'm going to show you is much more flushed out about our kids' scores and where they go. So, looks like a lot of information, so bear with me. Here are the numbers in red of the 2015 class and their average SAT score. Only 42% of our students take the SAT. That's a concerning number to me. We'd like to see that number go up because it's a gateway test to getting into schools. Yes?
So, as you know, I have kids that are...
At that point, yes.
Now, my daughter did the SAT. Now, we noticed that ACTs starting to become more.
Yeah,
Some of the
more kids are
schools
taking it.
that.
Yeah, it used to be west of Mississippi was ACT based and east of Mississippi was SAT based. Now it's crossing over pretty well. My son came home and told me, who's a junior, Dad, I'm going to take the ACT. People say it's a little easier to take. So we'll see. He's taking the SAT this weekend. We'll see how he does in the ACT. But I think of more concern for us is 42% of our kids are taking the test. I think if we get that number to go up, I think the scores are going to go down because you're getting to a broader pool of kids. But I think it's something for us to look at as a metric. When you look at our math and critical reasoning, critical reading rather, we're around 1,009, which is the state average. If you look here in Pennsylvania is 1,000. We're average. We're average. But where we are far less than average is on our percentage of kids taking the test. Okay, so that's a concern. Yes.
Have we ever looked at why?
Well, that's what the dig-in is now. Okay, once you identify the statistics, now it's about having the conversation with the staff and others as to why and what do we need to do to affect that growth or change. So
that would be coming more from a guidance question.
Absolutely, and I'm going to talk about guidance here at the end and how we're getting some of that information, but and what we're doing about some of that.
Well, let me just ask you one more question.
Sure.
The UN and they brought up way back when we had the SAT.
Yes.
We didn't have the ACT.
Right.
What do the colleges look at?
That's a great question. I just was speaking, were you and I talking about this? Yeah. About some schools like Albright will waive the SAT now and the ACT if you come and do a personal interview and write an essay. So what we've seen in schools is a trend for the liberal arts, small division 3 schools will basically set aside SAT and look at a number of other things. But the largest, most competitive schools are still looking at ACT and or SAT. It's synonymous for them. They have correlating scales, depends on what you want to do. So when we look over here, you can see the top tier 1 national universities, the hardest schools to get into, the Harvards, the Yale's, University of Chicago, all the way down to top tier liberal arts schools like Elizabethtown, Messiah, and the number beside them is their current national or regional ranking. So our students, our average students are able to access these average, this tier 1 regional liberal arts colleges. The Elizabethtowns, the Messiahs, the Lebanon Valleys. That's about the college-bound student from Daniel Boone can get into those schools. Do we have kids who supersede that? Of course we do. Okay, our top 25%, which is, here's their average, we're 570 out, excellent. 560 in math, very good scores. I mean, you can see compared to this, outperforming the state by a good margin. Where does that get you into? Top tier 1 regionals, the Villanobas, the Fairfields, the Loyolas, St. Joe's. That's the kind of schools our kids can get into. Do we have a couple kids who get into Ivies? Yes, we do. And let's take a look at who. So, if you look at the bell curve, okay, just any bell curve, when the staff told me we get kids into great places, I said, that's an awesome metric, let's see. Where are we getting kids into? Well, what we found out was that if we said 3 deviations out on the standard bell curve is about 2.5%, only 1.4 of our kids are getting into the most elite schools. Okay, top schools, we're talking the Harvards, the Penns, etc. Next here would be schools such as University of Virginia, Penn State, Ohio State. That would be an elite level for a national school, 6.1 instead of 13.5. In the middle average band, the Shippensburgs, the Kutztowns, the Millersvilles, the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is very competitive just to get into straight away. There's a lot of requirements, so it's not just about college, it's about competitive entrance. The apprentice school in Newport News, Virginia, very competitive trade school to get into. You have to have trigonometry, have to have advanced writing. So we're only getting 51% instead of 68%. So what's happening? Where are our kids? Our kids are in this part. This is non-competitive entrance college trade school. This is community college and or trade school. This is straight to the workforce. So you can see disproportionately we're putting kids in those situations. The question is not only what's happening, but why is it happening? So somebody explained to me, well, our best and brightest, they didn't know, they had the scores really to get in here, but they didn't know it was too expensive. That's a perception, it's not a reality, but that's a perception. So if they didn't know and it was based on money and they made their decision to go here, we should know that because then we didn't do a good enough job informing them that, well, most Ivy League schools are based, they have plenty of endowment and you go with what you can afford. Some students will pick this tier because they want to do athletics or some other activity. So the main point is we don't know why they're choosing what they're choosing. And our guidance department now going forward will begin to have those questions and ask why are we going where we're going. More importantly, how do we move how do we first become average, and then how do we move the mean above average at the high school? So that's where the work kind of, Mr. Martino, to your question is, why is it happening and what are we doing about it? And so you'll see some things that we're going to build out.
Let me just ask.
Yeah.
Do we guide our students that these are the better schools and this is what this will do for you upon graduation from the better schools?
For sure, somewhat, no question. Okay, our stronger question is how effectively do we do it and how much do we do it? And that's something that I'll show you at the end, that a change we made at the high school for this year that will maximize the piece you're referring to.
Mr. McKnight, if I could interrupt here for a second. I was disappointed this year we did not offer the survey that we had offered the previous 2 years to graduating to upper level students, upper classes at Daniel Boone High School. I don't know if we could resume that this year. I think that would be helpful. But I'd also like to see a component on that survey looking at our guidance services, because from my experience, I don't think, and this is going back a few years, but I don't believe our guidance department offered the guidance that would have been helpful to my peers. So I hope that has changed in recent years, but I would like to get some feedback from students there.
Absolutely. And so we're going to have a Gallup poll coming out later this month, and we'll get some of that. The poll you're referring to, I read at the end of the year, and honestly, I thought that we had to revisit the questions and the structure of the questions. So that's why we did not administer at the end, because I didn't think it would yield the kind of data that we could use to make the kind of insights that we need to make adjustments. So
on that note, though, it would be helpful if we could come up with a good system to ask us, because I want to get a baseline score so we can compare moving forward.
That's going to happen.
All right.
Yep.
Great.
So the district goals, the 5 here came from, I guess, Mr. Hurley and the board's conversation. So it's not necessary for the high school to have separate goals than the district goals. We should be feeding into the goals that have been established. So as an administrative team, we met. Mr. Hurley delivered those to us. Excuse me. We met added a couple of our own. So you can see that's how we're setting our work, and they're the goals that have been shared with the staff and moving forward. Here's the new staff in the building. So contrary to contraction, we do have some expansion. And you can see where the expansion has taken place. So here's some things that are new in the building and will be going forward. Not always popular, but definitely, I think, a necessary direction. 5-day lesson plan submission due by 7:45 a.m. For every upcoming week. And we can see those online. I can show you that if you want to see it tonight, on how we check, and every single administrator can go right in, see the lesson plans for the week online. Mr. Matz has helped us design that piece. It's all accessible without having to go seek out a teacher or have a teacher deliver it, so we can see it all the time. Grade books are updated weekly by Friday at 3 p.m. This will be going on our website. I wanted to present it to you guys first. The teachers already have it. But it's reasonable to expect grade books to be updated every week to inform students of where they are so they have understanding. I mean, I'm not as concerned about the parents knowing it. We're trying in high school to get students to be advocates for themselves and understand their grades. Turning grades around within a week for students is certainly reasonable. So that's what happens every Friday. Grading consistency. I heard the call loud and clear that a student may have a given teacher and get with 2 teachers with the same course. You have teacher A and you get a different experience in grade than teacher B. By design, not by performance. So that now we went to the departments and asked them to design grading consistency and measurements, and they've done that. So we have that up and running, and that was delivered to me. That's why you see September 8th.
So we've stopped grading on a curve?
Have we stopped grading on a curve? If there's grading on a curve, then the teacher's going to have to do that outside of the departmental grading piece, and then we wouldn't know about it. So does it happen in reality? It probably does. Do we know? Have we endorsed it? No, we have not.
If we find it, do we stop it?
We do. We find out why it's happening, and we have that conversation. Okay. Assessments, it's a tough issue for us at the high school because now we're benchmarking consistently through Study Island, especially specifically on the Keystone courses, the track where we're going. The problem is we assess kids too much. There is an assessment committee to look at that, how do we reduce the volume of assessment, and looking at possibly pulling out some of the midterms for some of the benchmarks and some other trade-offs. We'll have to have more dialogue on it, and that is a committee that is, Mr. Spores is our person on point for assessment, and he's leading that with teachers. Gallup Student Poll, which I mentioned earlier, is a student poll that measures a whole host of things that Mr. Kurz referred to, and some other data that we'll be able to pull out to help design and push forward. Observation model is differentiated model, which is the model of the district currently in meeting with Mr. Hurley. We had dialogue about where we're going to go this year. Observations at the high school are unannounced. So we're not following pre-conference, conference, post-conference. It's the right of management, so to speak, to do observations at will. It's a well-protected right, and that's what we utilize. It's always been my mindset that if you and I meet about an observation beforehand, and I tell you when I'm coming, I would expect you to do an outstanding job. What I'd like to do is see great teaching in an unannounced format. So that's where we are there. Customer service, had a lot of conversations around our customer service level, not only on the professional side, but from our office. How do we engage the community? How do we talk to the community? How does the community receive us? All those kinds of things. It was not up at the level that we think it should be at. Mrs. Weber, Mr. Spores put some things together, met with that staff. As you can imagine, there are many people who are, I wouldn't say not happy. I just would say that there's some rigor and restriction around some things that are uncomfortable. Change is hard for everybody. And so those changes are occurring, and that's the way we're going to go. We're going to make sure that parents and kids have a level of customer service that we hope is exceptional. That's what we're doing. So this is a place that you have to understand that at the high school. If you don't, then we'll have to talk to Mr. Hurley about what we do about it. Okay, lesson planning. I already referenced this point. The issue when we reduced from 5 levels to 3 levels, we had to have some acceleration training for teachers on how do you take a student who is now used to be in what we call applied or conceptual, and how do you provide the support and differentiate for them in what is now the academic piece. They've had 2 days, full days of training on that. And so we continue to provide support and help as that goes along. Here's the big one. Over the next 5 years, not right now, although people feel like it's a lot of change right now, it really has only been instruction and some management pieces. Here are the things that are going to be happening over the next 5 years, and some of those will be successful, and some of those will crash and burn, and we'll make adjustments. Pathways, which we'll be making that presentation to you as a curriculum committee and going forward in November. It's moving along really well, actually. Dual enrollment and early college admissions issues are still in the conversation, although it's been backburnered a little bit with RAC and others, just because of the nature of starting school and so forth, but I have to send some syllabus into those groups for them to approve, and then if they approve it, then we'll be part of it. BBEC internships, which is Berks Business Education Coalition, building internships at the end of pathways and opportunities for our students. Credit recovery, we had a little bit of that dialogue the last meeting, we'll have more. Advisory councils, Freshman Academy, transitional leadership networks. Again, picking our metrics of success. There's been a lot of feedback from the community, parents, about summer work and how we structure it. That'll become more formalized. We're working with the committee. World Affairs Council, BBC came to us. Could we sponsor a club to do it? It's kind of like academic challenge. I don't know yet, but that's a big conversation. It's kind of an interesting thing when World Affairs, and they compete, what kids know about the current state of our world. I've had this conversation with Mrs. Bikes a number of times about what is happening with our the councils that we put, the advisory councils that we've been operating. So we have over 40 people serving on those councils, academic, arts, athletic, and parent community, and they wanted to take on the world and do many, many things. I paired them, I said 2 things, guys. Each committee you do 2, and if we can implement those 2 things and grow them over the year and they sustain, we're on our way, because next year we'll do 2 more per committee. And, over time, we'll have quite a number of things. So the Academic Council finally came to, they had many things in their mind, but career ed and career day, like actually designing a career day at the high school. You bring many people in for students to experience that. A community using their contacts to secure internships for our opportunity. Mr. McAtee, for example, works in IT, he works in HR, and he spoke with the people in his company. They felt like they could take on 20 interns, put them through a formal interview process with their HR department. So we're not ready to launch at that level, but we're trying to exponentially capitalize on the human resource of this community without spending money. So,
along that line, Rusty, someone mentioned over the weekend, all students aren't going to college.
That's correct.
And your own bell curve showed that we don't have many businesses in this area. Mm-hmm. The businesses we do have, is there any way to do some kind of internship partnership with them? For instance, Farmers Auto Body.
Right.
Is there a way to do that?
The answer is yes. Twin Valley has done a great job developing the model you're talking about, and I don't think we have to be original thinkers. We can take their idea and just develop it to fit us. And so that's currently what we're doing, and we're going to use the 2 business teachers to begin to evolve this and support this as we go down the road and really look at how do we do it. The major concern for me, Mr. Martino, is even Twin Valley, everyone does it. The kids get in their cars and they drive. So they have to have a car and they have to have permission. And I just never feel good about a teenage driver, but that's how it's done. So more to come on that. You'll be hearing more as we head into the pathways in November, and over the 5-year thing, I think we'll get to a level where we have a healthy internship program, for sure. Arts Council, many other things are already happening. They're starting to display things in the community. They're bringing in artist in residence type folks. Athletic Council, increasing community engagement, increasing fundraising, working with Blazer Foundation, Blazer Foundation's had their hand on parts of all of this. Parent-community relations, that's Mr. Spores sits with that committee. That's our most active group. And one of their pieces is about communication. And they feel that communication is disjointed. I agree. I don't know that we have a good solve on communication. We tried the varying different opportunities we had through websites and Connect Ed calls, or, depending on how people think they should be used. I have a feeling others may feel differently. Our Facebook page. So we've been putting it out there, but it's still disjointed. So more work to do there. At the elementary level, you have a Tuesday folder, right? So that idea actually came up in this committee. Can we put a site on the district high school page that's called the Tuesday folder and put stuff in there? So we're going to do that. Mr. Matt said we can do that because parents are already acculturated into doing it. They look for their children's papers and important things to come home on Tuesday. So we can put it there. So we're going to co-opt that idea from the elementary folks. The model at the high school is this. On how we lead it, how we develop it, how we support it. So we're using a pyramidal mindset. Management of any organization, where you're directly dealing with the public, 75% plus or minus 5. And you cannot move to the next level until you have mastered or at least commanded the level below. So right now, we're spending an inordinate amount of time at the management level. We're not really at the great leadership level. We're not at a really strong innovation level yet because we're still working on standardizing the procedures in the building. So it's consistent. And then when we make exceptions to things, we know we're making exceptions too. So that's kind of our model. If you all have a question, it always falls on me, which I'm well aware of, but here are the point pieces that I manage directly. Mrs. Weber has the pieces you see there, Mr. Spores, and Mr. Shannon. Now the teachers have this. It's helpful for them to know who to go to. It gives you a way to reach out as opposed to kind of just, all these things are happening, like I ask a question here, I ask a question. So that's kind of the model that we have going there. Changing the guidance department, we project manage that group as well. So Mrs. Witzel is college planning and development, eSchool, which is our scheduling tool, internships as a liaison. Mr. Ritchie does NCAA clearinghouse and compliance, and scholarship programming. Mrs. Holland is doing transitions, which is how do we transition the freshmen out of the middle school and into the high school. We have an 88% graduation rate or 12% dropout rate, however you want to look at it. That is outside the boundary of what other schools like us have. Other schools like us are around 94. Okay, and this talk, we hit on this a little bit with credit recovery. So we think building a transition model is going to be helpful to the students. They come from getting a lot of support in the middle school, and the mindset of many of our staff at high schools, this is now high school, and you don't get that level of support that you had before. Well, I don't agree with that. And that's what the Freshman Academy is about, and providing some more supports, so that by 10th grade, they've transitioned in now. They're off and running on their own. Mrs. Marcinko has assessments, which is national, state, and local, which is a big project. Here's the big change. In addition to that, formatting that piece, the guidance counselors now have a formalized schedule like a teacher. That means that every period 1, they have something to do. Every period 2, we build in their planning time, we build in their lunch time. Here's what it's going to do, though. And this is what triggered me to this piece. I had a call last year, a couple of calls last year for some parents, and it was, the students were juniors. And there was a problem of some sort. And so I said, well, who is your son or daughter's counselor? And lots of times as a parent, I don't know who my son or daughter's counselors are either. But when they asked the student, and the student's like, I don't know. I met him once for scheduling. As a 9th grader, that's not okay. So we had to change the model. The model now puts us in play. And it's not that they don't want to, Mr. Martino, to your question earlier, not that they don't want to meet with. We've had crises galore to start the school year, just strange things. Strange, the blood moon must have tilted a lot of people. But, so they get consumed by those crises. If you don't block out the time for them to do whatever the tasks are, they fall by the wayside. So now this is what will happen. 180 IEP 504 GIEPs, structure. 360 college planning sessions. 360 student appointments, means students come in and sign, want to meet with their counselor, want to see their counselor. But here's the best. Now this is each counselor, 1,120 what we call caseload meetings. That's a touch and go. The student comes in, 10-minute meeting, they talk to them about, how's your life? How is everything okay? Are your teachers, is it good? Is everything fine at home? Those types of things. And so it's rapport building for those students. It's critical to help the transition. This alone, I believe, will have an impact on the dropout rate. Much more to be done. But their day is now scheduled and structured, where in the past it was not. So that's what I got. Hey, how long?
Much less than that.
All right.
25.
Questions? That is the current state of where we are.
That last piece about the meetings with the counselors, I think that's important that the kids know they have somebody they can talk to.
Harbor in the storm. That's what I refer to it as. Harbor in the storm.
And then even if they fall short of their goals because of crises,
right.
they still have
Absolutely. If they had crises push in and they met with half that number,
Perfect.
they'd be meeting with 600 kids on a touch and go basis. So.
Have you had feedback from any of the advisory committees on that plan? Or
On which plan? On this?
on your plan to improve, the guidance department?
I have not talked to our advisory councils on this piece. We have used those folks as. Yeah, I'm sorry?
You wanted to run it by the committee?
Well, yeah, I'd like you guys to see what's going on. Then, those points will go out from there. They're not really driving that particular piece. That was an internal management piece by
I think
the
parents
team.
will be happy to know that.
Well, that's going to go forward in a number of ways, yeah. But that,
Thank you.
yes.
Connor, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight.
Absolutely.
Very good presentation.
This next item on the agenda is actually fast. Connor has listed as secondary class size discussion. What we've talked about it in the past, but I don't know that it's ever been done, was the high school and the middle school. You're on a 6-day schedule. If you could possibly develop a spreadsheet for us showing us every teacher, every day, how many kids they have in class. Which leads to a question. The board over the weekend was being given different numbers for different classes, and it turned out that some of the smaller classes that we heard about were exaggerated. But we heard there's a high school algebra class with 11 students in it.
I'll go back and check them all for you.
Would you please?
Yeah.
Well, when you do the spreadsheet, you'll see it. But
Sure. If that's occurred, it's been based on what happens in a high school schedule from time to time. You'll have 31, and you'll have, you should have an 11. And that's because other impediments in the high school schedule, the students want to have a singleton course. Give me a singleton as well. What would be a singleton? Yeah, like, okay, let's say they want to have one of the APs that doesn't, AP music, and only runs that time. So these things we get to block it out and only allow certain things to trigger. So when that does happen, and it does, that's a cause.
just so you're aware, one of the board members, and it wasn't me this time, chimed in and said, with a class that small, we ought to have great math scores.
Great.
Connor, anything else on that item?
No, it would be helpful just again to get those spreadsheets just so we're aware. In terms of even if there are classes that again are abnormally large, it's good to know about these things. So if you could get that, Mr. McKnight and Mrs. Rexroad by no later than the 23rd of October. That's a Friday, the Friday before the next CNI meeting. That way we'll have the weekend to review it. That would be helpful.
Moving on to at-risk kindergarten, Mr. Hurley, we haven't really talked about that since the presentation.
Yeah, that's better.
I thought Mrs. Murgatroyd and Mrs. Latimer made a very nice presentation, but if there's any thought to doing this for the next school year. I think we ought to have it more fleshed out sometime in October. I mean, your enrollment for kindergarten is March, am I correct? Yep. So we'd have to have sufficient data, both cost and return on investment for the board to vote well before March. So I think October will be a good time to at least move on to the next step. Mr. Rathke, Mrs. Bites, any comments on?
If you recall, one of the folks that we talked to, interview-wise, I think I mentioned that. Did they have the program in Phoenixville that kind of helped the atmosphere, but wasn't necessarily a teacher-driven? They did a half day, but they kept the kids.
Are you talking about the elementary level, or they had that recipes and stuff for not something for kindergarten, and that was a half day academic, and then a half day they partnered with another provider to do enrichment. That is.
Well, that's even something to consider. I mean, if we partner with somebody else, it might even be less expensive.
Right. That's why we did it. Now, the other driving piece behind that for us at Phoenixville was that we had an inordinate number of kids we were losing to the charter schools, the brick and mortar charter renaissance. So because they were offering full day, we were not. By going into a full day model and partnering with another provider on a half day, we were able to draw a number of students back into the systems. Not only pay for itself, it didn't work. So it was really balanced against the charter.
Thank you both for that. High school course approval form discussion, Connor, and I guess it's written down here somewhere.
Yes, this is I wanted to include it on the agenda. Something else was in Mrs. Kiesel's scan that she sent to the committee, and I thought it would be good to discuss it. And if Mrs. Kiesel could provide an overview, or Mr. Hurley.
I can speak to that. This is something we actually began to put in place at the end of last year. So we've had it online, or we do have it online for teachers to use. Just another step in the process that gives us the opportunity to do some better planning as far as expenses to be incurred with new courses, such as curriculum writing and textbooks.
I have two thoughts on this. One, when this form goes into use and is filled out and completed to an appropriate degree, when the course comes before this committee and board for final approval, can a copy of this form be included?
Yes.
I think that would be ideal. And secondly, I received a question from another board member who's not on the curriculum committee asking if there was a similar form in terms of not adding a course but removing a course in the event that interest declines significantly for a course, or a course could maybe be transitioned to a different course that may encompass more topics. And that, to me, raised an interesting thought of how do we evaluate the courses that we're teaching to see if they could be improved, or to see if maybe we should do something different with that time and that talent instead. So, Mrs. Kiesel, maybe if you could explain, or Mr. McKnight, how the courses are really developed and also how they're monitored to ensure that they're still, well, one, relevant, both in terms of content and in terms of student engagement, but also if they aren't really desired as much as they may have been in the past, how we go about removing a course.
Mr. McKnight, wouldn't that be sort of included in that report you were going to give us in November of what courses you felt?
Maybe 1 and 2 year courses. I couldn't really hear it very well. Is he asking?
He was talking about what courses that we might either want to improve upon, replace, eliminate, and the question was, how do you evaluate?
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, that will come out when we discuss together, plus the things that run in one, will run every year or in 2-year cycles. The issue of evaluating a course, I have to give that some thought, but to say this, that some courses are requisite in a programming model. So, one of the things that we had prior was that we had high interest electives, courses that we thought students weren't thinking, it wasn't going to be surveyed kids for interest or departments for interest. And that's how we had the 20 courses from 2014 to 2016 that came online. Is that fair to say, Mrs. Weber? Is that right? So now what we're going to do is purposeful. I mean, it's not always about what students want, but something students need. How do we put that together? Also, high interest courses. So I'll have to think about that, Mr. Kurtz, about the evaluation process.
Well, I think that also fits with, we at least discussed, are there courses that we're not offering that maybe we would offer in place of some of the courses that we currently have, that we only have because we've always had them.
Right. That's some of the analysis that we'll be looking at in the 1-2-year model and the historical enrollment of those models.
Do we ever survey the students to see as far as their satisfaction?
I don't know if we ever. I did not this past year.
Did you get out of the class?
Sorry?
Just wondering, like, if a little survey would be a good idea to ask them if they got out of the class.
I have a sense maybe, and this is where that may be how it came about in the past.
Teacher had the idea of the course where the students be interested, have a conversation with the students they had and maybe the target audience. Then it kind of developed
right.
And it was kind of, there wasn't ever a visual survey that I can recall. It was actually sent out. There was more dialogue that occurred in the department's development of courses. Then you go back to their students, would you be interested in this, topic and guidance, or different things. That's more of a conversation.
I mean, one of the things you should keep in mind is that, every course and development of course has a cost. Bringing a single course online, just one section, you're looking at the cost of the text, which depending, let's say there's 20 students in there, and then you're also looking at writing the curriculum. So once the curriculum is written, then the cost, it's more efficient. So anything that you bring forward is going to be a cost.
Well, that's something else we need to discuss, and in fact, you weren't here, so I'll address this to Mrs. Weber. Last year, we sort of did it backwards, am I correct? We approved the course guide and then did the budget 4 months later. So, I mean, at what point, because you'll have a preliminary budget in November, the machinations that goes through, you're not going to have it finalized till later. So at what point should we really be approving the course selection guide?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is look at the possibility of rotation of courses. So once we have that, then we know that this is going to run 18 years, this will run on. That'll be part of it. But that's kind of the conundrum we find ourselves in, that kids get to sign up for these courses, and then they're interested and excited about taking these courses, and then we're still going through some of our challenges financially, and then a course gets cut. So, or we may not offer, or it didn't have 10 kids, and that's some of what we felt towards June, July. So I'm not sure we have a great answer to that unless it's just making students wait. Again, going back to you will see when you do the numbers for the schedule, and it's uneven numbers in the schedule that we have. I think it's fair to say that that's a handful of people working on the master schedule. You're looking at about a 12 to 13 week process to sign something that's pretty good. And that can only happen once we know that you guys get this is who you have, this is your staffing model. So that's, I kind of brought up at our last meeting that although painful, if we can make a decision about this is, we're going to have this cut of staff by March, then that's, you can't do the schedule until you guys tell us what we have.
Yeah, and this year could be even worse than previous years with what's going on in Harrisburg. I mean, we may be looking at them not approving anything until we're looking at the following year's budget. It's not looking pretty.
And if that occurs, we'll we'll probably find ourselves in the same boat we were last June, and we will be scrambling on a schedule over the summer that will put lots of phone calls back to you guys about how it's unfair that students will get.
Yeah, I just think last year we being the board as well as perhaps the administration, the kids shouldn't have to be scrambling like that. I mean, it's going to happen, but any more than they have to.
Right.
How is the master schedule done? Is there a software program that way?
Yes, it's e-school, and Mrs. Weber is really our guru at it, but the overview is this. Students sign up for courses with their counselors. Those courses are numbered and graded, and then we start to begin the process to let that piece populate as we know what our staffing model is. That's an oversimplification, but that's not right, what you said?
Yeah, and you start determining how many sections you run, what staffing you have. Do you have enough staffing to run the number of sections you're looking at? But then it's, you know you have the staff who wants to teach it or who is qualified to teach it, and then you try to build it, and it's like a big, giant jigsaw puzzle of trying to fit all of it in the number of periods the teacher has available and the number of students, and then trying to make sure, and this is where conflicts come up, is the kids in the courses they sign up for, well, these pieces they want jive with these pieces they want, and there's, 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 kids who all want those same pieces.
So
but
does that software do a lot of this work for you? Or?
It does some of it.
Say with today is always the logistics software they have out there. FedEx can make their.
It's a matter of how much time you have, because it's all about modeling and running and how much work you can do on the front end with the number of features you have, and the number of requests you have, and the number of sections. You can do some of that pre-modeling and build the best schedule, but realistically, most school districts start their scheduling, like they start when they talk about their budget for this year, that is the fall, when they do their budget, they are knowing their staffing, what they're going to have for the following year, so that they can begin, most administrations at high school, begin the actual process of building the master schedule in January at the latest February. At least knowing and having those, the students do their course selection. When I talk to our consultants at the IU, and we talk about pushing these off, and we said, you need to call me in December, January, we need to start laying the groundwork. And when you talk about, well, we have some of those answers, we'll have some of them, but not all of them. Because it's really how many times can you effectively run the master schedule and get the results back, and then go back and make changes? And how many times can you run it and model it and do it, and then undo it and then redo it? And how much time do you really have? And have the counselors look at it? And in summer, the department chairs aren't there to be able to look at the issues that are going to arise in their department. I mean, it is a extremely time-consuming, complex process that the earlier we get it, the better off and the fewer conflicts there will be. But the later we get it, we'll do our best as we always do, and we try to do what's in the best interest of kids. But it's the challenge, because you get to a point where we have to make decisions now. Kids have to make their choices. This isn't going to have to be the way it is. It's not the best we have, but it's the best we're going to get in this time frame. And then let's try to resolve it. And we still, even this year, we're moving periods after we had kids. Kids didn't know it, but as counselors were resolving issues, they were saying, here, I need this class this period. And then you have to go in and manually change. If you had 25 kids in one section, you have to manually change all of it. That with counselors, with me, with whomever has their hands on it, it's just time consuming, because each one of those students' schedules, once you lock the master schedule, is locked. And everything has to be done by hand in comparison to when you're still modeling and using the program to its effectiveness. You still have a little bit more freedom to run it in one way or another. But you probably run a master schedule at least probably 75 to 100 times, if not several hundred. If you have the time, you want to run it as much as possible and have it build out. But it's all a matter of time frame and allowances. But budget's important.
And let me share this complication with you guys. And I asked there's a person at the IU who will do this analysis for us, and we've done it, but we wanted an outside person to look at it. So in the years, I guess about 5, we reduced the high school staff. A number of people were downsized and shifted around. In that time, we also added 20 courses. And so when I asked him, I said, how many teachers do we need to run 143 courses in this many students? And he said, you told me no. How many teachers we need? And it's not the number we have. It's not close enough. So we have to take a look at it and how we're going to do it. And that's what, again, offering these courses every should help. There's a lot.
So it's not the number you have. What are you saying? You have too many?
We're saying we have too many courses for the number of teachers that we
Needs to be a
have.
So,
I mean, Mrs. Weber, before you go on, let me just ask, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Small when he's not here, but the budget by the end of January is probably not going to be very much different from the budget in June. Does January give you sufficient lead time? Because what I'm thinking, I mean, in January, if we tell the high school and middle school, here's the staffing we can afford. I don't know what the number is, but here's the staffing we can afford. You could work toward that. It's the elementary school that will change more or less based on enrollment as opposed to the middle school or high school. You're based more on teachers per course, and the elementary school is more teachers per student. Am I correct?
Correct.
So,
That's what the student said. Absolutely. It is ridiculous.
so we could pretty much, pardon?
So give the damn chalkboard. Got it.
So we could pretty much, I would think, be able to give the high school and middle school a number in January that would be pretty close to what you're going to see in June, I think. And I think it would be better than what happened last year.
Yeah, and some of what happens is when you start having this conversation with kids, well, I'd like you to take that course, but I don't have to. So then they drop the course. What are you going to take instead? Well, do I have to take it instead? You know, and try and figure out it doesn't fit in my schedule, doesn't fit in my schedule. You're having all those conversations with the kid, and when you leave things up to the kids at that point in time, when they're looking at the year beginning, sometimes it's, no, I'm not going to take that. But, you know, I don't want that as well. So, and the more lead time we have to be able to build a master that can fit it and get what they want, the better off the kids will be, the parents will be, all of us.
Do you have anything? Mr. Spikes? Mr. Hurley? Connor, if you're ready, I'll turn it over to the other administrators and then public comment.
oh wait, I do have one more issue, I'm sorry. I thought
She
you
always
meant on
does.
that
She waits till I'm all done talking, then she has one more
I'm
thing.
sorry, I thought you meant on that topic. Mr. Hurd, I was just wondering about the status of the pay survey. I was wondering, I know it's time for that, it's an every other year survey, and I was wondering.
We're not implementing the pay survey.
Okay, thank you.
And we're glad to hear that. We thought it was very, very intrusive. Any of the administrators have anything they want to bring up? We now have an audience, Mr. Kurtz.
Great.
Mr. Cockle, do you have anything?
Yeah.
I knew that. Yeah, hold it down a second. There, it's on.
It's on. Okay. First thing, I wanted to ask about when you looked at your kids going into college. Is that what did you get where they were accepted, or they went?
Accepted and confirmed that that's where they intended to go by the counselors. So, and did they run in money property challenge for the summer at counseling?
Okay, because that was kind of our situation. Alexis she got accepted to Penn State. She ended up going IUP because she's planning on transferring after 2 years. So she'll save $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. So I didn't know if you got the information of where all they got accepted, or just where.
The phraseology we use is, did you get accepted to your first choice? Okay, and where was that? Whether they attend or not is a different issue because there are money issues sometimes, for sure. But a measurement, not the only measurement, the measurement of how we're doing our work is, are we preparing students to chase the dream they want to chase? And so if we are, then that's reflected in, I was able to apply here, I was able to accept here, I was able to go there, that's another example.
Okay. And the course selection with 10 kids or less. when you offer a course and there's 9 kids, and then you want to cancel it, why not let it run that year and then not offer it the next year? Or look at the track record of, is it always between 6 kids and 12 kids for that class year after year after year? Or is it 20 kids, 15 kids, 8 kids? Then you will be able to say to parents, first, they won't even know that it's not, it just won't be on their course selection. Makes it a little bit easier for your administration from angry parents and upset students.
I think that's part of what Mr. McKnight's got to research is the history of your courses, correct?
Right. That's where we're trying to go. I mean, it's similar to what you're saying. Look at some historical data about enrollment, look at which courses do we need to run every year, which ones could be offered here. Because one of the things that is tough for the students who are seniors is getting caught in this short trap right now. But if my goal is for every student to have an option to have every course in the course catalog in their 4 years, so that's what we want to be able to offer kids. And you can get to that by running it on the odd even year piece. And then the other thing I think, whether we continue to offer courses is about looking at the historical data over a 3, 4, 5 year period, consistently getting 5, 6 students who really have to reflect on that. Do we offer it or do we drive that to an independent study?
Right.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, these courses that may be offered every other year, they wouldn't necessarily be junior year or senior year courses. They would be a course.
Well, yes, kind of. To another point, we have to look at right now. People have built-in grade restrictions. Sometimes you do need to have a grade restriction. Many of our courses do not need a grade restriction, and they're built in that way. And what we need to put is a grade priority as opposed to a grade restriction. That causes some of this as well. So there's a host of things that we're looking at with the IDU's their scheduling analysis with Mrs. Weber and our team to try to make it better for next year and continue to grow it into a better situation.
Right, and I understood all that. My only other point was instead of pulling it for that year, pull it for the next year, not put it on the course selection. So if you have 8 kids, you let those 8 kids take that course, and then you don't offer it the next year. Then offer it the following year, and have that do your, 1 year have it, 1 year don't.
That's something we'd have to think about, Shane, because, you're looking at the economics of it. You're looking at $100,000 for those 8 kids, and then you don't know if the next year when you might have had 15 kids that wanted it.
Right.
I'm not saying it's...
Before you do that, I think so. We need to announce the fact that it will be an every other year course. Because if a kid that might have taken it, but they said, "Oh, I can grab it next year, and I'll do this year,"
Right.
and then all of a sudden it's full for next year, and they can't get it. So I think if we're going to do that, there's this every other year model that kids need to know that in advance, and that way then they won't have complaints that what happened to them.
Right.
I think we'd have to see what kind of model Mr. McKnight comes up with after he completes the survey he's talking about.
Okay, and the last thing that I wanted to bring up was grouping the kids on the academics in the elementary and middle school levels. I brought it up at the supervisors meeting. I wanted to get a chance to talk to Mr. Hurley, but that was my fault. I had back problems last week, so I wasn't able to come in and talk to him. But I think now, since Mrs. Porsche combined all the grades into,
elementary schools,
into the elementary schools, that you can pull. Before there used to be, like in my class, there was 3 teachers, and they would split up the kids with the GIEPs. And then they would expect the teacher to, when they're doing their weekly scheduling of what they're going to be teaching, their lesson plans, they're expected to do it on 3 levels. So the kids with the GIPs, the kids, in the middle, and the kids towards the bottom. So you would have 3 teachers doing basically 9 lesson plans for one class. Then you times that by 5 or 6 subjects. They're putting a lot of work, extra work, into their lesson plans. And what I believe is happening is that it's not always working that way. It sounds great in theory, but the way it's supposed to work is the teacher stands up, they teach, they start teaching about Africa, and then they break them up into 3 different groups, and this is a little bit harder, a little bit not easy, well, a little bit easier than that, and then your basic. I don't think that's working like it should. It's a lot of extra work on the teachers. You're still basically putting them in their academic levels just inside of the class. Now with all the kids in one building, the grades, I think it'd be easier to make larger classes that the kids that are struggling, you can put more, an extra aid in there to help them. The kids that don't need help, the teacher can, teach away. They can, give them a lot of information that they can handle. My concern was, now my daughter's no longer in elementary, but I still feel it should be something to look into because I feel she missed a lot in her elementary years because of this. I asked, when she was in elementary, instead of splitting up the kids with the GIEPs, at least keep those 12 or 16 kids together, not a 12 or 16 kid class. There'd still be 20 some kids in the class, but you only have one teacher then working to get those kids caught up. Because the 1 year she was missing math and she was missing reading. And the teacher told me she doesn't have the time to get those kids caught up in what they were missing.
Well, I don't want to even attempt to answer that because that's an administrative question. I mean, I don't know how they group the children in the classes, nor what's required of grouping the children in classes. So I think that's something that
we should talk about privately.
I think the answer is beyond the scope of this meeting itself, but what you're really talking about is differentiating instruction to meet the students' needs. Historically, the way that's always been done, if you go back to the 70s and 80s, it was done by leveling the classroom. That still exists. That still exists to some extent. That is certainly popular, and it can be easier for teachers in that regard. However, it's not always right for all kids. It does, when you look at the research, it does produce achievement gaps, dramatic achievement gaps that you have to look at. So really what you want to be able to do is differentiate within the classroom itself. That is best practice. What I hear you saying is an execution issue, is you don't feel like that was being done very well.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the achievement gap, is what you're doing is preventing an achievement gap by holding the kids that can move forward. You're holding them back.
Shouldn't be if it's done well.
No.
But you're saying in practice it wasn't done well.
What I think you're suggesting is that if we have 3 classes and you have the bottom third in each class, to put them all in one class, and have your middle thirds in each class all in one class, and your top thirds all in one class.
And I think that would benefit everybody. I think, if you're a kid struggling in class, and you're sitting next to a person who's not struggling in class, and you don't get it, a 3rd grader or a 4th grader to raise their hand to ask the teacher, I don't understand it. Can you explain it to me again? They're probably not going to ask the question because they don't want to feel, you know,
My
inadequate.
understanding is though that those groups are fluid, that depending on what the lesson is, the kids are moving in and out of those groups in true, you know, differentiated hybrid model or whatever it's called. So that's actually beneficial to have them grouped in the classroom. I'm sorry that it's not been executed,
But then why, then let's get back and do that with math and do that with reading.
so what is it just how
In-
social studies or something?
Social studies, science, your arts, music. But when it comes to math and it comes to English, what I'm saying is what they do because they say that's the best way to do it for math and to do it for reading and English.
Is your back better now?
Not really.
When it gets better, I suggest you call Mr. Hurley and
I
make an
will.
appointment.
I will. I just wanted to bring it up to you guys, and then I'll talk to Mr. Hurley this week.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the administration on something like this. It's
Okay.
not something I should be answering.
But your curriculum. Okay, thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
You'll need a motion to adjourn.
Connor, we adjourned at 7:17.
Great,
I'm
thank
going to
you.
hang up and call you back in about 10 minutes.